Okay, that's the okay. Stop singing. Stop it. That's the Bengals song they play after the Bengals score a touchdown. So we hear it if we ever go to the games. We hear it about 3 or 4 times a year. I think is the number of touchdowns that my poor beloved Bengals score. Oh, the hat, the hat. I got this in 1986. It was my first Bengals game. My dad took me, and so this hat is 31 years old. Still looks great, huh? Huh? Anything to deflect you from having to look at this. You stare at that. So that's Sunday. It's NFL starts today, and so maybe my Bengals will win a game. Maybe they'll go to the playoffs again. They probably won't go to the Super Bowl, although they've been there twice. So who knows? Anyway, good to see you. Thanks for joining me here today. A few things before we get started. You'll need you need to take some notes as we go through here. You need your textbook as well. You also need to download the document that's in Canvas that goes along with this video. It's titled Supplemental Lecture Material because there's a bunch of links and stories that you're going to be reading here. This will take you some time. Even though the video says X number of minutes, there's some times you're going to have to pause me and read some articles, watch some videos. So give yourself plenty of time before Tuesday's class to get through this. This is as I said on Canvas, 3 classes worth of lectures. So this is going to be a fairly long process, but my students wanted more, in their evaluations, wanted more class time to work on their writing with me there and to have more class time to get those assignments finished. So this is a way for me to accomplish that. I've already explained why video lectures are in some ways much better than in-person lectures. You can look at that rationale on Canvas as well, but I won't rehash it here. So let's move on. You're going to take some notes here. Of course, you can pause me anytime you need to if you're not ready. If you recall, on Thursday we started with a list of things and stuff. You're going to be compiling this list throughout the semester. These are critical elements that are going to help you be better at reading, speaking, thinking, and writing. First thing you wrote on that list was it's not just what you say that matters, but how you say it. Not just what you present, but how you present it matters. And that means a whole bunch of different things, from words to structure, lots of stuff, and we'll get to it through the semester. Second thing is that the lead is everything. If you don't have a good lead, you lose your audience. You're not getting them back. They're not going to finish whatever it is you have to say or whatever it is you've written. Next thing to add to the list, avoid the phrases I think, I feel, in my opinion, I believe, to me, personally, all those phrases, all the aunts and uncles and cousins of those phrases. When you're giving your opinion about something, don't start with those phrases. It's hard to do. In class, I'm going to ask for your opinions, and you're going to say, well, I think, or I believe, or I feel. No, they have to go. Watch any professional broadcaster, journalist on TV, or listen on the radio, and you will never, or you should never hear, I think, I feel, in my opinion, I believe, personally, to me. They're all out. Delete them, and instead of saying, I feel that the Bengals will make the Super Bowl this year, instead just say, the Bengals will make the Super Bowl this year. It's direct, it's powerful, it gets rid of this wishy-washy, spineless jellyfish, soft phrasing to try to ease the bruntness of your opinion. So delete those from your speaking and writing. It's a tough thing to do, but do the best you can. Fourth thing, I'm sorry, on the list should be to be a better writer, read everything. That's the William Faulkner quote from the syllabus. You just have to read everything that you can get your hands on. Some stuff you'll like, some stuff you won't like. Take what you like and use it in your own way, and then delete the stuff that you don't enjoy. All right, so those are 4 things. When we talk about leads, when we go back to the second one, please start to notice the leads to the stories. How are these authors trying to get your attention right away? The Working Poor article with Joseph Pereira starts with humanizing the issue. So don't read just to memorize things. Read to look at how things are put together and see what was effective, what the choice was, and whether you like it or dislike it, and what the purpose of that choice was. We'll be getting into leads this semester. We'll be getting into. I'll have you read articles just for the lead only, and also have you practice leads as well, so you start to get more comfortable with them. Okay, moving on, and I'm going to go through the stuff quickly. So again, pause me or rewind me or go back when you need to. Follow up on John Oliver's video from Thursday. You're going to get a lot of this from me in class. I don't like to sit and talk nonstop. It's not effective. So I do try to break up the monotony of the lectures with links and articles. So even though this is me talking the whole time, you're going to be pausing me and reading and looking at videos throughout this process. A quick follow up on the John Oliver video. What I loved about it is the how you say it part of things. He's talking about journalism today, and he does it in a way that by and large is very entertaining, which is why there's like about 8 million views of him, and there's only going to be about 30 views of me. He's more entertaining than I am. But what struck me most about the content of his presentation is how that was the part about I think Sam Zell was his name, the owner of the paper, who doesn't care about covering Iraq. He just wants to make money. And thinking about Sam Zell, and is he wrong to want that? Versus, let's say, Jeff Bezos of Amazon, who bought the Washington Post and is willing to lose millions of dollars because he wants the newspaper to be robust in its coverage of this country. But I would argue that Sam Zell isn't wrong with how he's approaching owning a media company. He has a right to make money. That's what this country is based on, and you have a right as a consumer to say, I don't want this product. I don't, as much as I enjoy a good puppy story, I want more than this. And once that starts to happen, the Sam Zells of the world will say, you know what, I do need to start covering, I do need to have my paper start to cover more articles, more stories with teeth to them instead of puppy stories, although puppies have teeth too. Anyway, you also saw John Oliver allude to the big error that legacy media, or traditional media, as I call it also, made when they went from print to online. And I was at the Cincinnati Enquirer in the mid to late 1990s when this happened, when the Enquirer first got its website. Everything on the website was free, everything, every article. And then finally, and it was like that for every single newspaper in the country. Oh, by the way, you might see a random shot of Annie or the dog in the background, just so you know. The problem with that is once you give away something for free, ain't nobody going to want to pay for it once you start charging. And that's unfortunately what has happened to all this legacy media. Now you can go to the Washington Post or the New York Times or the Cincinnati Enquirer, and you might get a few articles for free, but then they'll start blocking you and start having you pay for it. It's like heroin. You get the first hit for free usually, so I hear. But then you're hooked and you want more and you're willing to pay for it. Newspapers are trying to do that too, but it's kind of like shutting the barn door after the horse has already left the barn. It's very difficult to get your audience back once you start to tell them that they need to pay for the product. Also, it doesn't help that if you want, say, Bengals coverage, you don't have to go to the Cincinnati Enquirer anymore. There's ESPN, there's Bengals.com, there's Bleacher Report, there's Barstool Sports, there's NFL.com, there's CincyJungle.com. There's all these other places, and most of them don't charge a cent. So it's easier to say no to this legacy media. So that's a big problem, and it's difficult to say where we're going to go from here. But I want you to recognize that issue with the legacy media and the result of that terrible decision when the internet first started happening for legacy media in the 90s of not charging for content. So the media has to resort to tricks to make money. And if you look at your supplemental material, number 2 on that list, and click on that letter A link, you'll see one of the ways that media companies try to trick you. in order to get you to click on their site. So go ahead and click on that. I think it's dailylight.net. They trick you by having teaser headlines. So if you go to that one and it says, oh, mine's trying to pop up, doesn't want to pop up. There you go. Mom leaves dad alone with their daughter, but she never expected this to happen. And so you have to, okay, well, what happens? You have to click on it to find out. And invariably, you're going to be disappointed, right? It's never anything that great, but you clicked on it. And that's the psychology of having a tease or a clickbait headline. So these purposely ambiguous headlines make you make what you're about to watch life-altering, but it rarely ever is. Or they'll force you to click multiple times through something. If you click on letter B on your list there for number 2, this is Alton Brown reveals all his best kept secrets, this chef. And articles like this force you, I know BuzzFeed will do this sometimes and a lot of other sites, force you to click on a slideshow. Raise your hand if you hate the slideshow. Ugh, drives me nuts. But it's this way to get more clicks. More clicks mean more money. Websites make money 2 different ways: how long you stay on that site and the number of times you click on something. Then they can go to advertisers and they say, look, the average person, and this is why Facebook makes so much money, the average person stays on our site for X number of minutes, or in Facebook's case, hours a day. And since they're there a lot, they're going to see a lot. There's a better chance of them seeing your ad, or the average viewer, consumer, clicks on our site 40 times per visit, and every time they click, an ad will pop up. Again, better chance for your ad to be seen by them, and we can target your product because we gather a bunch of information about that person. We know age, gender, all that sort of information, and we can target the ad to you. So there you go. That's the big way of getting money for websites. Letter C shows a way that websites will couch paid content within content created by journalists. This is from NBC. And so if you look, you see headlines under letter C, but you'll also see these little green boxes with the word sponsored next to the headlines. Those are not stories by the journalists. Those are ads. So the one under the picture says, HelloFresh is bringing good energy back into my home. You might realize it's an ad, but a lot of people won't. They'll think it's a journalist producing an unbiased, objective editorial about this product when it's in fact an ad. Letter D talks about, shows you how some sites will allow companies to pay to place stories on their sites. Bleacher Report is a perfect example of this, a website that came out of nowhere, I think around 2005. It's been since bought, I think by, I forget, Time Warner maybe, for hundreds of millions of dollars. Anyway, when they first started, they didn't have an audience coming to their site, so they paid CNN, the LA Times, San Francisco Examiner, a bunch of other sites to allow them to put their stories on their site. So this is CNN under letter D, and you look under the sports section where it says Super Bowl's most feared player. If you were to click on that, that would actually take you to Bleacher Report, and not CNN. CNN, instead of paying a bunch of sports reporters, contracted with Bleacher Report. So it looks like CNN's sports section is much more robust, but at least 2 or 3 of those articles come directly from Bleacher Report, and a lot of people would have no idea that when they click on that they're even going to another site. They don't even realize it. So it's a win-win for CNN, and it certainly was a big win for Bleacher Report. So those are 4 different ways that media is trying to get you to their site, or to get you or to get more money for their particular site. Some tricks of the trade. What John Oliver presented, and what I'm going to say here, doesn't make journalism sound like a wonderful career choice, unfortunately. But don't misconstrue that that journalism is all doom and gloom. because this actually is a great time if you want to go into journalism or even marketing, PR, communications. If you can write well, if you're adept at social media and the workings of the interwebs, and all these skills that you have that you have far better than I do, um, then you're going to get a job, and not only that, but you can move up the ladder quickly. There's an editor at the Cincinnati Enquirer right now who's 27, but he's so adept at understanding the social media push and the ways to get clicks and to bring people to the site that he's moved up the ladder higher than people who are my age, so because of that knowledge. Uh, it also helps that you're going to be cheap labor when you get out of school, and older people who have been there a long time and their salaries are higher, they're getting kicked to the curb because of those salaries. So it actually is a great time to go into journalism. Plus, as John Oliver pointed out, professional journalists at legacy medias, do still produce quality journalism. They still uncover stories like the water crisis in Flint, or things that happened in a presidential administration, including, of course, the most famous one, which is Watergate and President Nixon. So, there is that part of what you can do as a journalist. It makes you wonder, because journalists can do such great work, why so many people hate journalists. But we're going to get into that much more in this semester about why it's a profession that's hated so much in this country. I'm going to move to chapter 2 now, and go there instead of chapter 1 with a quick historical lesson on the media then and the media now. You need to know a general understanding of how the media is changing, the pros and cons of how information is presented to you. So back in my day, to get your news, you subscribed to hard copy paper, a little paper boy riding his bike would throw the paper in your front lawn, or you watched the big three, and the big three networks were ABC, CBS, and NBC. Along with PBS, those were the only four channels we had growing up on television. And my parents were NBC people. We watched John Chancellor. I remember him in the late 70s, early 80s, before Tom Brokaw took over. But these were big name people. If you were the anchor, then you were extraordinarily famous on NBC, CBS, and ABC. You were a white man. You were probably from the Midwest somewhere. I think Tom Brokaw's from South Dakota, North Dakota. You didn't have an accent. You didn't have a New York accent, a Brooklyn accent, a Southern accent, California dude accent. You sounded like a true American, which was a kind of plain Midwest accent. Those big three networks, CBS, ABC, NBC, were networks that people, by and large, trusted very much. We had supreme trust with these newscasters. And in the 60s and 70s, it was Walter Cronkite on CBS, David Brinkley on ABC, John Chancellor on NBC. Notice again, white, not a brown face, not an Asian face, not a woman face. These were white men that dominated the news. Walter Cronkite was the most famous one of them all. In fact, we called him Uncle Walt, or my parents did. America did, because they trusted Walter so much. He was like a member of the family, and what he said was gospel. You just believed what Walter Cronkite said. One of the most iconic moments in TV news history occurred during the Vietnam War, when Cronkite went to Vietnam and came back and decided that it was not a winnable war. It wasn't going to work out for this country. So I'd like for you to go ahead and click on that clip of Cronkite talking about the war. It's a short clip where he comes back and tells the United States how he feels about the war. So pause me and watch that clip. All right, so we're moving on. John Chancellor and David Brinkley, if you want to click on the next one, that's I think it's still number 3. You can just take a look and see what those two guys look like, just for reference. When the president at the time, when Walter Cronkite said that information, the president was Lyndon Johnson. The famous line from Lyndon Johnson was, "If I've lost Cronkite, I've lost the American people." That's the power that these news anchors had at the time. And Johnson knew that arguing that we should still stay in Vietnam was going to be a hopeless argument once Walter Cronkite said that information. So imagine, Barack Obama as president saying something like that about Tommy Lahren, if you know who Tommy Lahren is, or Donald Trump saying something about Rachel Maddow in the way that Walter Cronkite said it. Half of the country would agree, half of the country would disagree, and the weight and power of those words wouldn't have any sort of pull on the American people, like Walter Cronkite's comments did, and then Lyndon Johnson saying, "Well, if Walter Cronkite says it, then I guess I got to follow it." So now we don't have the big. Well, now we still have the big three, and they're still pretty highly regarded. But we have thousands of more options for news online, on TV, on the radio, through social media. And the essential question is, whom do you trust? Especially when everyone seems able to refute the other side on every issue. Obama said something, Fox News and other conservative media, doesn't matter what he would say, would find a way to spin and argue it. Donald Trump says something, doesn't matter what he says, the left is going to find a way to spin it and make it sound terrible. And now news is 24 hours. It's not just for an hour like it used to be. 6 p.m. was your local news. 6:30 was the national news. It's now 24 hours of whatever you want. ESPN is 24 hours sports. So, the same incident, Colin Kaepernick deciding to kneel for the national anthem isn't played just once, at 6 or at 6:30. It's played 24 hours a day, and it's dissected for days. People will talk about it over and over and over again. So it becomes, even though it was one event, it seems like it's happening over and over again. And now with so many websites and news stations and social media sites, people are fighting to be heard. And so what happens is they become more outlandish in their comments because they know the more outlandish I become, the better chance I have to be heard. So this idea of reasoned, rational thinking sometimes gets thrown out the window because we would rather hear extremes. They're more entertaining. But please know that these people are not journalists. These people are commentators who are talking about news stories that journalists have written. And the problem is this: most people don't know the difference between watching a news report or reading a news report and then watching a commentator or reading a commentator discuss those news reports. And that's a problem because there's so much more opinion than there is fact in the news today. They have to fill up that 24 hours somehow, and they don't have enough news for that, so they have to fill it up largely with commentators discussing the news. And we're not only changing how we get our news, but the people who report are having to change what they do. So if you remember in the John Oliver video, Marty Barron, who's formerly from the Boston Globe, now he's with the Washington Post, talking about the responsibilities of today's journalists. You read about that in your lovely textbook about convergence on page 4, that you better have more than just writing skills or more than just speaking skills, that you have to do more. Convergence is a word that should be on your resume, by the way. And if you have to pause me to update your resume, do it, but get it on there. There are people who wish they had convergence, and if you click on number 4 with the Chicago Sun-Times photographers, you're going to see folks who got laid off, photographers from the Chicago Sun-Times, all of them fired because all they did was take pictures. And the owners of the Chicago Sun-Times said, "You're costing us too much money." So even the Pulitzer Prize winning photographer from the Chicago Sun-Times got fired. And so read through that article about those photographers getting laid off, and then look at the next one. You'll see that the reporters from the Chicago Sun-Times had a new responsibility, and that was to learn how to use an iPhone. So when they were at the fire or at the council meeting or on the scene of a murder, they not only had to try to interview people and run down witnesses and try to get the story, they, oh, by the way, had to take out their iPhone and take pictures of the scene. These photographers had to sit in meetings to learn how to use an iPhone and learn how to try to take a decent picture, um, all to try to save money for the Chicago Sun-Times. So that's convergence. Again, you are already skilled at this, which is good news for you. You can take pictures, and you're learning how to write well, and you're going to learn how to report well in here too. But this is what's happening in today's media. All right, in looking at the pros and cons of today's media, most people are getting their news through social media. If you click on number 6, you'll see, this is no shock, I know to you, how young people get their news. It's mostly through social media platforms. And if you look at how news is presented on Facebook, on Twitter, you'll see why it's so popular with young people. The presentation of that is better suited for young people. Media companies are in the business of news, but they're also in the business of making money. And so therefore media companies try to match stories to your interest. You can see that on Facebook, where you'll get stories or even ads that they magically somehow know a lot about you. Online media companies try to match and keep their audiences, and I'm sure all of you, again, see that on Facebook. Facebook also, for a while, had trending news curators. These were people, and you can click on number 7 for this. These were people whose job it was to look at what news was happening and decide what, if you have a Facebook page, what goes in that trending news section. It's usually 3 or 4 articles. They decided what was the most important thing to show on Facebook. The article for number 7 details the work environment that those curators had to endure. So please make sure you read that article. The next one, so you pause me and do that. The next one on number 8 talks about Facebook finally deciding to fire those news curators and the problems with firing the curators once they decided to let computers decide what news stories should trend. This is a problem that's just beginning. It just came out in the news that some Russian folks bought at least $100,000 worth of ads and planted stories on Facebook. Again, this trust factor of what in front of us really is news, or as the president says all the time, what's fake news, things that are being presented that aren't true or are heavily distorted. It's only going to get worse, not only because of the ability to manipulate stories, but videos, and the fact that we're seeing now some videos where people are able to manipulate the face of the person on the screen, manipulate their mouth, so it looks like they're saying something that they really didn't say, but you really can't tell the difference, and use the voices, the words that people have said in the past, and change their and add that voice to their mouth movement. And so now, you might see a video where Donald Trump says, "I hate all of America," but it's been a manipulated video. That's coming, and it's going to make it more and more difficult to understand what truly is real that's being presented in front of you. Anyway, media companies are businesses. They're in the business of making money, and media knows what sells. Conflict sells. And nowhere will you find more conflict than in politics. There are some critical names of folks that you should know. Rachel Maddow is on MSNBC. She's on the left. Sean Hannity is on the right. He's from Fox News. Click please on number 9 just so you can see Rachel Maddow's page. You don't need to watch her if you don't want to. Hello, Scout. That's Scout the dog. Sean Hannity, if you just want to click on his link just so you have a knowledge of what he looks like and what his page is like. Again, if you want to watch some of their stuff, you are welcome to. There's a brief look at the left and the political right and what they say about each other. It's a good time for stereotypes, don't you think? In case you don't know much about politics or the right or the left, this is as basic as basic can be. The stereotypes, when people look at the folks on the right, they look at them as these gun worshippers, folks that don't care about minorities or gays, the disenfranchised, basically anyone who isn't a white Christian. They think everybody should be able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and go and make a life for themselves because by golly, they did it, so anybody else can too. How's that for stereotypes? Meanwhile, on the left, these are the liberals. They're bleeding hearts. They're lazy. They don't really love America or God, or at least the Christian God. They're followers of lamestream media, which is a phrase that Sarah Palin, who's a former vice presidential candidate, used a lot instead of mainstream media. They're sheep to being told what they should believe in. So these are the stereotypes that the left and the right, at least on the extreme views, kind of look at each other, and the commentators play up these stereotypes as much as possible because they know it'll create conflict. Here's a perfect example: numbers 11 and 12. Fox News has this opinion piece. Excuse me. This is from a conservative named Wayne Allen Root. Trump gave a political speech back in September before the election about immigration. And Fox covered it one way in number 11. And Slate, and if you look on that chart, you'll see where Slate is, covered it also. What you'll see, and I'd like for you to read both of these commentaries, will show an incredibly different take on the same speech. This is the same speech by this same man, Donald Trump, about immigration, and take a look at what Fox says about that speech, that a president was born that night. This was in, I think, late August of last year, versus Slate that says that his speech was angry and scary. So this is what media companies will do. They'll take something, and then the commentators will push their agenda or their point of view, and you'll see the extreme views of those two things. So go ahead and read those. Pause me, read those, and then come back to me. Most people see clear distinctions in liberal versus conservative news organizations. Conservatives argue that liberal organizations, and they consider CNN, NBC, the big three, ABC, CBS, NBC, New York Times, Washington Post, they consider these liberal organizations. They consider them all powerful, pushing a narrative for the liberal agenda, and that the conservatives, are the ones swimming upstream. They're the ones who are being shut down by these major liberal companies. However, if you click on number 13, you'll see that the real mainstream cable news network isn't CNN. It's not NBC or MSNBC or any of those. It is, in fact, Fox. That the majority of people watch Fox than any other cable news, which then you can argue that the majority of this country is conservative and because of watching Fox. By the way, your textbook argues that the vast majority of the media is conservative, and they argue that, the textbook argues that because there aren't truly extreme liberal views. An extreme liberal view would be, let's get rid of capitalism. Let's ditch the Constitution. Let's get rid of the three branches of government. That's liberal. That's extremely liberal. And so in that way, most media companies aren't advocating for that. They're much more conservative in their views. Okay, moving on. Again, chapter 2, beginning on page 31, discusses why people distrust the media. In chapter 2, page 31, one reason is this clear objective to slant the news to a certain point of view. I said this in class, you're most likely to go where your opinion is validated. So if you're conservative, you probably are going to Fox News. If you're liberal, you're probably heading to Slate or you're watching Rachel Maddow every night. And you probably aren't going to change your mind, certainly if you spend your time going to those sites. What those sites are doing are validating your opinion. And this is called confirmation bias. Please click on number 14. which is a link. I'm also going to put this article on as a supplement document in files in Canvas because it's a Washington Post article, and the Post is starting to shut out people who don't have a subscription. This is an article titled "Why Facts Don't Matter to Trump Supporters." Now, this kind of rips on Trump supporters, but you can take out the word Trump, put in Hillary, put in Obama. It doesn't matter because confirmation bias happens to everybody all across the political spectrum. That we look for ways to confirm that what we believe, and we'll go there. And even if somebody presents something that is against what we believe, that doesn't change our mind. It only further pushes us to dig in on our beliefs. So please read, pause me, and please read that article. Okay, I'm going to stop recording right now. This is going to be a series of videos because we've reached the 35, almost 36-minute mark. So I'm going to pause, and I'm going to come back with your second video. So hang in there. We'll continue. Thanks.